Folks, I'm extremely sorry for being late because now I had my podcast with Andre Lukinenko, who is a two-time Carol Grandmaster. It was very proud moment for me because I had interviewed one of my heroes, and he's also one of my best people that I have ever known because his kernels are the best, and he is one of the best Kaggle grandmasters that I've ever seen in the community, and that's why I'm a little late. Sorry for that. You know, Moscow time 5 o'clock is probably close to 7 o'clock here, so I had to take some time and I had to do the podcast with him. So sorry for it. So let's get it started. MRI fundamental, magnetic resonance imaging. These are just the fundamental techniques which are just evolved in order to give you that intuitive understanding of what this technology is all about. When you think of MRI as one such thing, it's in just one imaging technique which just gives that insight of what's happening inside a living entity without any invasive process. Of course, there is lot and lot of radioactive substances involved. There is lot and lot of nuclear aspects which is being involved here, but it is negligible. It's like probably veritasium does that, right? It's probably kind of like an sieverts of radiation that you can experience from probably 300 bananas. It's all the back radiation that you are being seen at the end of the day. So let's say this started. When there is an radiological imaging, there is nuclear imaging, ultrasound, and MRI is also one of the things. So medical image modalities have been something which is huge today because when you think of such kind of techniques which are being involved, there is a huge amount of math which goes on in order to give you that kind of an understanding. It's just that spatial wave which just gets transformed into the frequency and the time domain, and all these FFTs, BFTs, DTFTs, all these come into the picture. You can apply a DTFT, get the spectrogram of and digital data, then feed it through a neural network, because neural network can't take in data which is kind of numbers. Of course it's a sequential data, but it can't take the data in terms of numbers. Thus, to get lot and lot of insights, you need to put the spectrogram in. So neural network can't accept that, so you convert it in the form of image and then throw it inside that neural network. So let me just give you that brief understanding. These are just light waves, the electromagnetic waves at the end of the day when you take it into consideration. But these are just the emitted particles out of, actually they are not even particles, they are just tiny bits and pieces of the particle which are emitted. There are electrons, there are protons, and also there is some nuclear reaction which just goes on. I'm not a nuclear engineer at the end of the day, so I can't explain it. So the app person is Sven Chilton. You can just go there and ask him what's this nuclear thing which is going behind this imaging modalities and all. So this is how your spectrum is being spread all throughout. These are just radio waves, gamma waves, infrared rays. It's a huge way of understanding of what this technology is all about. So to just give you that intuitive understanding of what this technology is, let's just hop in to the further technologies. The beauty of medical imaging is non-invasive tomographic imaging and also physical metabolism and function. When you take off these imaging techniques, these are non-invasive. Let it be ultrasound, which does not affect the baby at the end of the day. So it's taken into consideration because it satisfies all the conditions which the mother who is carrying a baby is needed. So thus helping them to diagnose an early diagnosis of some ailment which the baby might get into, or else the progress of how the baby is growing. So ultrasound is affecting it. Tomographic imaging is basically computer assisted, where tomography is one such technique where you're involving lot and lot of mathematical calculations in order to get that brief understanding of what this technology is all about. Physiological, metabolism, and the function. Metabolism is like it does not hinder your actual metabolism which is going in. Of course there is some amount of back radiation which you experience, but at the end of the day it's not making an immense amount of change in your physiology or the metabolism or the normal functioning of your system. So that's where the beauty of biomedical imaging comes into the picture. So why we take into this consideration? Because of high resolution, high soft tissue contrast, there's tomographic imaging, scan along any direction. You can just twist and turn the patient. You can't really twist him like this, but at the end of the day, you can make some sort of a manipulation so that it does not affect the patient at the end of the day. There is scan along any direction where you can really move the CT scan machine in any direction, but it gives you an accurate result at the end of the day. So when you are thinking of such kind of imaging modalities, MRI is one such technique. fMRI is in picture, but we will be going on about what this technology is all about. It's also about integrated in many imaging modalities. You can have a CT scan and you can do a lot of aspects. You can think about it at the end when you are looking at some kind of an application. It's just the sequence of pulses which just move out. So pulse sequencing and also manipulating also is much more effective here. And also there is physiological and functional imaging where you can consider when it comes to a baby, your ultrasound comes into the picture. When it comes to an imaging, something as good as uh, and cancer, PET scan come into the picture. So there are a lot of things which are involved. So let's just move on. What is the main signal source of MRI? It's just a proton. Why proton? Protons are just that one magnetic entity which you can take into the picture. 70% of the body consists of water. That means there is immense amount of electrons and proteins involved. So that is how your MRI comes into the picture. When there is an effect of the magnetic field which we see, then there is an effect of this functionality. So magnetic field affects the actual movement here. So there are odd atomic and they are just mass numbers, because uh, nuclei actually is said to have no mass at the end of the way, but it is carrying protons and neutrons. So there is an immense way of saying what this technology is all about. But you know when you think of this technology, it's almost similar to a nuclear imaging, but using magnetic field which is being generated from the protons at the water molecules which is there in your body. So magnetic moment which can be directional, so you can take in this leverage of having this angular momentum and a magnetic moment and just converting it into a form of an image signal with some FFTs, DFTs and all together, so that you get a proper imaging at your analysis. Image is in raw data which is in a k space. It's nowhere related to what your actual imaging can be seen. But when you are applying some sort of a transform, so there is 2D FT, which is the Fourier transform which is being applied, then you get the images. It's specifically a huge amount of data which is in signal flow which is going in and giving you that sort of an intuitive understanding of what this technology is all about. So when we move further, MRI consists of three: magnetic, resonance, and imaging. When you think of these, a magnet is just a radio frequency transmitter and a receiver, a set of three gradient coils, X, Y, and Z for imaging. When a magnet is like 1 Tesla, it's just like 10,000 gausses. So human MRI scanner is an FDA approved 7 Tesla is basically, and also there is an availability of 3 Tesla. When you think of this 7 Tesla, it's just 70,000 gausses. That means much more powerful, more accurate imaging which can be seen. Main function is to make the proton spin to a top process. Why I have given you this? It's because you can be precise at the end of the day when it comes to frequencies and also when it comes to proportion of the magnetic field. That's where the resonance frequency comes into the picture. It has to be in par with your angular and magnetic moment which you are just generating in your body's water molecules. So there are superconducting magnets, there are permanent magnets, and all these techniques are being involved in order to achieve good amount of imaging. Initially when Rontagen gave out the X-rays, he experimented on his wife, and there was an ailment. So now X-rays are sort of an kind of a nuclear in their process of reacting when it comes to the body's actual potential. But it's being neglected because techniques have evolved, and there are more imaging techniques just like MRI, fMRI, PET, spec, lot. So you can think of this. Permanent magnet is usually for 1 Tesla, and there's no maintenance cost because there are less amount of radiations of these magnetic field which can be experienced. So at the end of the day, it doesn't give you much accurate results, but it has its own pros and cons. So less maintenance. So when you think of such kind of a system, it's just a helium filled with a cold head, and there is an outer shield which is just directing all the magnetic field into one picture, or else one region which you are taking into consideration. There is mine windings, there are shim coils, there are outer vacuum shields, there are helium vessels, there are outer cold shields. There are a lot. These are just for directing your magnetic field into your body or the region which you want to scan. There is a way in which you can really think of, CT scan. When you are near the CT scan machine, you can't take metal, or else the MRI can't, or else for your MRI scan, you can't wear and watch and go and sit in front of the MRI machine because it's magnetic, so it tends to pull off your metal. So there are pros and cons involved. So RF transmit calls, they will just keep transmitting the data, and the way they are being received, there are receive only calls where they will just keep receiving, and the way in which the molecule starts behaving, that's how the signal starts varying in the K space that will be obtained in the K space. Then you apply an Fourier transform, that's what you get, and final viewable object or an image which you take into consideration. So there are gradients, there are relaxations which I'll be coming up in the future slides. So X-ray, X radiance, Y and Z are these coils which you can take into consideration. X is always on the surface, it will be complete thing. Y is actually the actual modality which you'll be studying, and Z is in all directions. So it's the three axes which are considered, but it's in a 2D space that image will be appearing. There is something called as DICOM images, digital image for communication for medical imaging. So when you think of such kind of formats, it's a huge chunk of data which is being aggregated and being thrown to you. So lot and lot of frames, lot and lot of processing. So specific absorption rate is basically the rate at which the electromagnetic energy or radio frequency is absorbed by the tissue. So watts per kilogram is basically one. So it also means that even if you are more fat, your way in which your MRI is going to come is going to differ. So sometimes when there's huge amount of fat in your body, it starts affecting your scan. So make sure that you have a less amount of weight. I'm also trying to reduce my weight, so it doesn't matter. So magnetic resonance phenomena is a spin with no directional classification analog, which I will explain in the future. These are some of the TED talks which I think it is required for any person who wants to really get their insights on. So just do go and check it out. So I'll end this in a very small way. I'll not take too much time. I'll just be there for only 30 minutes. You can ask your questions if possible, or else I'll end the meeting so that I can do my exam. So can be caused by a precise amount of action. There is a process, there is a lot and lot of things. So these are precise when it comes to axis. So when it comes to the recovery of the precision, can be termed in terms of the tissue types. There are B0, B1 magnetic fields which can be using, and there are gradient fields which are enclosed for the spatial information. The hypothesis is there is a Boltzmann distribution, and increase the field of strength should accentuate the difference in parallel and anti-parallel spin, increasing the signal to noise ratio, which is actually one of the techniques which you can really observe in the future, because this Boltzmann distribution is basically one such technique when you will be not technique, it's just a hypothesis where you will just be trying to involve more accuracies into your system. So obtained by the set of 3T and the 70 scans. The future images that I'll be showing is not from my research, it's all from the open source world which we are seeing, and you can get these data sets at the future. There is epi sequencing, fMRIs, then there is auto structure, MP rate sequences. It's all in the 3T and the 7T technology. These are resting with moving stimulus, and also there is and tensor imaging technique where you can involve and just analyze the flow of your blood through your neurons, and also you can analyze all these, which will give you an intuition of what's the psychological approach which you're doing. Analysis through SPM and a MATLAB software packages are available, so do check it out if possible. But in future, I'll be doing this part of the thing in March, because I have my exams now, so I need to give myself my time for the exam. So I'm not keeping any workshops in the February, so will be my last in the month of Jan, and I think in the February, I think it will be in the end after my exam. So I'll be out of the community for a longer time. So yeah, sorry for it, people. It's all about the spatial analysis, signal to noise ratio which you're taking, and also the temporal analysis which you will be taking. There is an PCA, which is principal component analysis, but you will be doing an individual component analysis because your temporal data flow is there. Greg Mori always says that there is not that huge amount of data, but there is huge amount of temporal data flow which we are seeing. So this is how the temporal analysis comes into the picture. So this is one of the example of 3T scan, 3 Tesla scan, which is less accurate, more blur, and requires a lot of pre-processing in order to give that. But this modality actually is not that accurate when you're trying to diagnose some congenital diseases or some heart diseases or some so do check it out in the month of March. Yeah, in the month of March, yes. So now when we come to the conclusion, spatial signal to noise ratio is expected to increase for 7 Tesla, although it's statistically proven through the results here. So there is a result showed, sorry for my typos. Result showed here is 70 auditory component signal better correlated with the sound envelope. There is correlation and decorrelation at the end of the day, which comes into the picture. So do check it out. So I think this is the end of the slide, and thank you so much, people, for your amazing time, and also thanks for giving me such opportunity. Pi and AI Bangalore chapter for giving me this talk. It's a very short talk that I did, but it's going to be one of the insightful talk that I'll be giving in the March. So this is the prerequisite here. So do check it out there. So thank you, people. I'll end the broadcast.